Remember the patrol cars of ADAM-12? The show once made the world feel simple, right and wrong clearly defined. But real life was far harsher. Many cast members met tragic ends. Let's uncover who they really were and honor the legacies they left behind. Martin Milner as Officer Pete Malloy. Martin Milner was born on December 28, 1931, in Detroit, Michigan. At 37 years old, he played Pete Malloy, a senior patrol officer and direct partner of Jim Reed on the streets of Los Angeles in ADAM-12, 1968. This role cemented his image as television's quiet, moral center. However, the calm authority on screen concealed a life shaped by instability and loss. Constant relocation followed him from an early age, eroding any sense of permanence and teaching him to rely on himself emotionally. Acting became his refuge, leading to early film work and later, to the road-bound years of Route 66. Professional momentum never translated into inner ease. Instead, success layered responsibility onto a man already accustomed to carrying weight alone. Marriage to Judith Jones in 1957 offered structure, but Hollywood schedules strained the bond. As Milner moved between demanding projects, Route 66, ADAM-12, and later appearances like Columbo, family life became compressed into the margins. The pressure was quiet, persistent, and unresolved, leaving him torn between being present at home and being reliable to an industry that rewarded constancy over vulnerability. Grief then redefined everything. The sudden death of his son Andrew in 1984 fractured the emotional scaffolding he had built for decades. When his daughter Amy later succumbed to acute myeloid leukemia in 2004, the earlier wound reopened with devastating force. Work slowed, public appearances thinned, and the discipline that once sustained him became an act of survival rather than ambition. Chronic heart failure shadowed his final years. Finally, Milner died on September 6, 2015 in Carlsbad, California, at 83, and was cremated. His estimated $2.5 million net worth, earned through long-running television success and residuals, stood in stark contrast to a life whose defining moments were not accolades, but endurance through repeated private loss. William Boyette as Sergeant Mac McDonald. William Boyette was born on January 3, 1927 in Akron, Ohio. At 41 years old, he played Sergeant Mac McDonald, the stern but principled LAPD supervisor in ADAM-12, 1968. His character was a figure of authority whose presence grounded the series in discipline and realism. Audiences saw command and control, rarely suspecting how much hardship had shaped the man behind the badge. Growing up during the Great Depression left lasting scars. Financial instability forced him into work at an early age, replacing education with responsibility and urgency. That pressure hardened him quickly, embedding a survival instinct that later surfaced naturally in roles on highway patrol and dragnet, where restraint and endurance mattered more than emotional expression. Adult life offered continuity but not comfort. His marriage to Joan Reynolds endured decades, yet recurring financial uncertainty from character work created tension at home. While Boyette appeared steadily on television, Perry Mason, Emergency, and The Andy Griffith Show, supporting roles rarely translated into security, and the weight of providing without stability never fully eased. Physical decline arrived quietly. Recurrent illness weakened him over time, even as he continued to work in projects like The Rocketeer and The Hidden, drawing praise for intensity that felt lived in rather than performed. Pneumonia and chronic kidney failure gradually overtook him, limiting both stamina and independence in his final years. Sadly, Boyette died on December 29, 2004, in Mission Hills, California, at 77, from complications of pneumonia and kidney failure. His estimated net worth of around $1 million, built from decades of television work and military pension benefits, reflected a career of persistence rather than reward. He was laid to rest without fanfare, remembered as a man whose authority on screen was earned through a lifetime of quiet struggle. Gary Crosby as Officer Ed Wells. Gary Crosby was born on June 27, 1933, in Los Angeles, California. At 35 years old, he played Ed Wells, the capable, energetic patrol officer in ADAM-12, 1968. The role offered brief stability in an otherwise turbulent career, but Crosby's personal life was marked by volatility long before the cameras rolled. Fame arrived early and distorted everything. As the son of Bing Crosby, expectation replaced affection, and discipline blurred into fear. Emotional and physical punishment at home fed resentment and confusion, conditions he later laid bare in his memoir, Going My Own Way. Those unresolved wounds followed him into adulthood, shaping a fragile sense of identity that never fully escaped his father's shadow. Professional opportunities appeared promising. The Bill Dana Show, musical performances with the Crosby Boys, and guest work on Dragnet and Emergency. Yet consistency remained elusive. Alcohol became a coping mechanism, gradually undermining reliability and trust, even as he continued to land supporting roles on shows like Hunter and The Rockford Files. Marriage failed repeatedly under that strain. 3 unions collapsed amid addiction, legal disputes, and emotional withdrawal, leaving fractured relationships with his children. Attempts at recovery came late, often interrupted by relapse, reinforcing a cycle of regret that deepened isolation rather than resolving it. Tragically, Crosby died on August 24, 1995, in Burbank, California, at 62, from lung cancer linked to years of heavy smoking. He was buried at Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills Cemetery. His estimated net worth of about $1.2 million, drawn from music royalties, acting work, and inheritance, stood as a modest sum for a man born into legend. Fred Stromsoe as Officer Jerry Woods. Fred Stromsoe was born on June 15, 1930, in Denver, Colorado. At 38 years old, he played Jerry Woods, a supporting patrol officer in ADAM-12, 1968. The character appeared regularly but never moved into leading story territory, serving as operational support within the unit. That restrained on-screen role contrasted sharply with the pressure-driven life he lived off-camera. Stromsoe grew up in a blue-collar household tied to mining work, where income depended on shifting job locations. His family relocated repeatedly, interrupting schooling and preventing academic continuity. He left school early to work, contributing financially rather than completing formal education. This forced transition into labor at a young age produced long-term psychological strain and limited future options outside physical work. His career developed along 2 parallel tracks. He acted in series such as Gunsmoke, Route 66, and The Fugitive, while also working extensively as a stunt double for Martin Milner and David Janssen. Stunt assignments exposed him to repeated physical impact without the protection or compensation given to principal actors. Over time, accumulated injuries and fatigue became part of his daily condition rather than isolated incidents. Marriage did not stabilize those pressures. Stromsoe was married to Nancy Berry, but the combination of long shooting hours, travel, and inconsistent income created persistent tension at home. Emotional distance followed, and the relationship deteriorated without public conflict. Even while appearing in films like What's Up, Doc and The Slime People, his private life remained strained and unresolved. Long-term smoking compounded physical damage already present from years of demanding work. Stromsoe died on September 30, 1994, in Los Angeles, at 64 years old, from complications related to emphysema. His estimated net worth of approximately $800,000, earned through acting, stunt work, and assistant directing, reflected steady employment but limited financial security at the end of his life. Claude Johnson as Officer Brinkman. Claude Johnson was born on May 17, 1938, in Lassen County, California. At 30 years old, he played Officer Brinkman, a minor but recurring patrol officer in ADAM-12, 1968. The role involved brief appearances rather than character development. His career followed a similar pattern of steady work without advancement. Johnson grew up in a rural, low-income environment after his father died at an early age. His mother worked multiple jobs, and Johnson assumed household responsibilities while still young. Educational opportunities were restricted by financial necessity, limiting career mobility from the outset. These early constraints shaped his adult working life. He remained employed across television throughout the 1950s and 1960s, appearing in the Donna Reed show, The Untouchables, and later ADAM-12. None of these roles provided long-term contractual security. Each project required new auditions and relocation, reinforcing professional instability even as his reputation for reliability grew. Johnson married and had children, but irregular income and career uncertainty placed ongoing strain on the household. Financial stress became a constant factor in family life, contributing to tension and emotional distance. He deliberately avoided publicity, keeping these issues private and unaddressed in interviews. Sadly, Johnson died on May 18, 2009 in Los Angeles, one day after his 71st birthday, from natural causes. Burial arrangements were not publicly disclosed. His estimated net worth of around $600,000, accumulated through decades of television work, reflected a long career without financial leverage or late career resurgence. Kent McCord as Officer Jim Reed. Kent McCord was born on September 26, 1942 in Los Angeles, California. At 26 years old, he played Jim Reed, a newly assigned rookie patrol officer, learning the job under Pete Malloy's supervision and gradually growing into responsibility in ADAM-12, 1968. The character's clarity of purpose became McCord's signature, and, quietly, his boundary. Financial pressure shaped his early adulthood, instilling discipline and a cautious sense of responsibility that followed him into marriage and work. As ADAM-12 gained traction, stability came with a cost: relentless production schedules and limited downtime. The same steadiness that made the show believable narrowed the space for experimentation, even as he sought range through projects like Galactica 1980 and guest roles across network television. Family life endured, but absorbed the strain. Married to Cynthia Lee Doty since 1962, McCord balanced long days on set with obligations at home, often returning late and emotionally spent. The absence was subtle rather than explosive, accumulating over years as a quiet tension that required patience rather than resolution. Professionally, identification with a single role proved confining. Attempts to pivot, Baa Black Sheep, Airplane 2, later work on Farscape, expanded his resume without restoring momentum. Advocacy work with the Screen Actors Guild added purpose, yet underscored a reality many actors face. Respect without renewal can be its own kind of burden. Today, McCord is 84 years old, living privately and appearing selectively at fan events tied to ADAM-12. His estimated $1.5 million net worth reflects residuals, union pensions, and appearances, evidence of a career built on consistency rather than reinvention. Art Gilmore as Lieutenant Moore. Art Gilmore was born on March 18, 1912, in Tacoma, Washington. At 56 years old, he appeared as Lieutenant Moore, a commanding lieutenant who issued orders, briefed officers, and represented departmental leadership in ADAM-12, 1968. His role focused on supervision and command rather than personal storylines. Outside the frame, his life was shaped by long-term economic pressure and relentless work demands. He grew up in a labor household where income depended on railroad work and remained unstable for years. Financial hardship required him to take jobs early, often prioritizing income over consistent schooling. Academic pressure and limited resources narrowed options, pushing him toward work rather than long-term education. That early necessity formed a pattern of constant productivity that followed him into adulthood. Marriage did not ease that pattern. Gilmore married Grace Weller in 1938, and they raised 2 daughters, but the relationship absorbed the strain of his workload. Continuous commitments to radio announcing, narration, and television, including Dragnet and Highway Patrol, kept him away from home for extended periods. Family life remained intact but functioned around his absence rather than alongside it. Professional responsibility intensified with age rather than diminishing. His voice work expanded across Highway Patrol, The New Breed, and ADAM-12, while he maintained leadership roles within broadcasting organizations. The pressure to remain active, reliable, and available limited opportunities for rest, even as peers retired. Finally, Gilmore died on September 25, 2010, in Irvine, California, at 98 years old, from natural causes. He was survived by his wife, Grace, his daughters, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and burial details remained private. His estimated net worth of approximately $1 million, earned through decades of radio, narration, and television work, reflected sustained employment rather than sudden financial gain. Robert Patton as Detective Sergeant Stone. Robert Patton was born on October 11, 1925, in Tacoma, Washington. At 43 years old, he played Detective Sergeant Stone, a senior detective responsible for interrogations, case oversight, and directing junior officers in ADAM-12, 1968. The role placed him in investigative and command-driven scenes rather than extended character arcs. His personal history, however, carried persistent damage rooted long before his career stabilized. Patton grew up during the Great Depression in a household marked by financial collapse and alcohol abuse. His father's addiction introduced instability, neglect, and episodes of emotional harm. Poverty restricted educational opportunity and pushed him toward early self-reliance. Military enlistment became an escape route rather than a career choice, offering structure where none existed at home. Marriage carried similar instability. Patton married Patricia Grant first, then Peggy Lloyd in 1956, with both unions ending in divorce. Career demands and irregular employment placed constant pressure on domestic life, while public scandal followed when he was named in the 1962 divorce proceedings involving Glynis Johns. Personal relationships deteriorated under professional strain, leaving long-term emotional consequences. Career success did not offset those losses. He appeared in Airport, 1970, Lassie, and earlier gained recognition in 12 O'Clock High, yet sustained leading roles never materialized. Television work remained steady but fragmented, reinforcing financial uncertainty even during peak working years. Stress accumulated without structural relief. Tragically, Patton died on December 29, 2001, at his home in Malibu, California, at 76 years old, from terminal cancer. Burial arrangements were handled privately. His estimated net worth of approximately $700,000, earned through decades of acting work, reflected a long career marked by continuity rather than financial security. Jed Allan as Reno West. Jed Allan was born on March 1, 1935, in New York City. At 33 years old, he played Reno West, a repeat burglar whose cases were investigated and closed by Reed and Malloy in ADAM-12, 1968. The character functioned as a recurring criminal figure whose arrest demonstrated procedural persistence rather than redemption. Outside the series, Allan was building a career that demanded constant reinvention. He grew up in a poor Bronx neighborhood where instability was unavoidable. His parents divorced early, leaving him to be raised largely by his grandmother, while financial stress shaped daily life. Money concerns restricted choices, forcing maturity before readiness, and replacing security with obligation. That early pressure created a drive for self-sufficiency that followed him into adulthood. Career advancement came with heavy personal cost. Long-running roles on Days of Our Lives as Don Craig and later Santa Barbara required rigid schedules and emotional intensity. The demands of daytime television left little separation between work and personal life, reinforcing fatigue and narrowing emotional bandwidth even as professional visibility increased. Marriage absorbed much of that strain. Allan married Janice Toby Brown in 1958, and they raised 3 sons, Mitch, Dean, and Rick, while his career required sustained absence and long production cycles. The marriage remained intact until her death in 2001, but the pressure of soap opera commitments placed constant weight on domestic stability, quietly testing resilience rather than breaking publicly. Allan died on March 9, 2019, in Palm Desert, California, at 84 years old, from natural causes. Burial details were kept private. His estimated $1.5 million net worth, earned largely through decades of daytime television work and hosting projects, reflected longevity and consistency rather than sudden success, closing a career built on persistence under continuous demand. Robert Donner as TJ. Robert Donner was born on April 27, 1931, in New York City. At 37 years old, he played TJ, a former convict turned police informant who provided street-level intelligence in ADAM-12, 1968. The role placed him as a functional intermediary between criminals and law enforcement rather than a heroic figure. His off-screen life carried deeper instability than his screen roles suggested. He grew up in impoverished neighborhoods marked by abandonment and addiction. His father left early, and his mother's substance abuse created an environment defined by neglect and emotional volatility. Exposure to addiction at a young age normalized chaos, planting patterns that later resurfaced in his own struggles. Stability was learned late and imperfectly. Career momentum arrived unevenly. Donner appeared in Cool Hand Luke, Rio Bravo, and later gained popularity as Exidor on Mork and Mindy, but the work never stabilized into long-term security. Comedy success masked unresolved personal damage, while irregular employment reinforced financial and emotional uncertainty beneath public visibility. Marriage reflected similar instability. Donner married Cissy Wellman first, followed by Jill Sherman in 1982, but substance issues and emotional volatility undermined long-term balance. Relationships fractured under the weight of unresolved addiction patterns, leaving personal life fragmented even as professional appearances continued. Donner died on June 8, 2006, in Los Angeles, California, at 75 years old from a heart attack. Burial details remained private. His estimated $800,000 net worth, accumulated through character roles and television appearances, reflected a career sustained by talent but constrained by personal struggle, ending quietly after decades of internal conflict. Virginia Gregg, as in White. Virginia Gregg was born on March 6, 1916, in Harrisburg, Illinois. At 52 years old, she appeared in ADAM-12, 1968, as In White, a female suspect connected to a criminal investigation handled by uniformed patrol officers. Her participation aligned with her long-standing work as a character actress. Behind the camera, her life had been shaped by early emotional trauma. Her childhood was marked by loss and instability. Gregg's father died when she was young, and her mother later remarried a strict stepfather, creating an environment defined by control and emotional isolation. Reports from later life suggest experiences of psychological and physical mistreatment, which limited social connection and reinforced withdrawal. These early conditions produced resilience but also a lifelong emotional guardedness. Her career offered structure but little personal relief. Gregg worked steadily across radio, film, and television, appearing in Dragnet, Gunsmoke, and dozens of other series, while also providing the voice of Norman Bates's mother in Psycho, 1960. Despite constant employment, she described herself as professionally invisible, often cast to serve narrative function rather than identity. The workload remained heavy and repetitive, prioritizing reliability over recognition. Marriage did not provide stability. Gregg married producer Jaime Del Valle in 1948, and they had 3 children, but creative differences and professional friction eroded the relationship. The marriage ended in divorce in 1959, leaving her to balance single parenthood with an unrelenting performance schedule. Emotional distance replaced domestic partnership, and personal fulfillment remained limited. Gregg died on September 15, 1986, in Encino, California, at 70 years old from lung cancer linked to long-term smoking. Burial details were not publicly emphasized. Her estimated $500,000 net worth, earned largely through voice acting and radio work, reflected a career defined by consistency rather than financial security, concluding quietly after decades of sustained labor. Leo Gordon, as Carl Carney. Leo Gordon was born on December 2, 1922, in Brooklyn, New York. At 46 years old, he appeared in ADAM-12, 1968, as Carl Carney, a criminal figure questioned or pursued during a police operation. The role matched his frequent casting as lawbreakers and hardened men shaped by conflict. His personal life, however, mirrored hardship beyond fiction. Gordon's childhood unfolded in extreme poverty during the Great Depression. Raised by his father alone, he left school early to work in construction and later joined the Civilian Conservation Corps. After military service, he committed armed robbery, was shot during arrest, and served 5 years in San Quentin prison, where he educated himself extensively through reading. Incarceration became a turning point rather than an endpoint. Career rebuilding followed discipline and strain. After studying acting under the GI Bill, Gordon entered Hollywood as a physically imposing character actor, appearing in Riot in Cell Block 11 McClintock and recurring roles on Maverick. He later wrote extensively for television, scripting episodes for Maverick, Bonanza, and ADAM-12, earning a Writers Guild nomination. Despite productivity, he remained typecast. Marriage offered continuity but carried pressure. Gordon married actress Lynn Cartwright in 1950, and they had one daughter. The marriage endured until his death, but the shadow of his criminal past and demanding work schedule placed constant emotional weight on family life. Stability was maintained through discipline rather than ease. Gordon died on December 26, 2000 in Los Angeles, at 78 years old, from heart failure. His ashes were placed alongside his wife's in a columbarium at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a rare public detail marking closure. His estimated $1 million net worth, earned through acting and screenwriting, reflected a career rebuilt through persistence after irreversible early damage. Bert Mustin, as Charles Jenkins. Bert Mustin was born on February 8, 1884, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. At 84 years old, he played Charles Jenkins, an elderly citizen involved in a police case that Reed and Malloy respond to in ADAM-12, 1968. He was known for starting his on-screen career late and then becoming one of television's most familiar older faces. That late start looked charming from the outside, but it sat on top of a life that had already carried decades of pressure. Mustin's early years were defined by work, not childhood. In the kind of working-class environment where money decided everything, the loss of a father meant the family's stability collapsed fast. He was pushed into labor around age 10, not as a lesson in responsibility, but as a requirement for survival. Schooling became irregular and secondary, and that gap wasn't just academic. It shaped confidence, social life, and the feeling of always being behind, always needing to prove he deserved a place. Even when acting arrived much later, it didn't erase what came before. It simply replaced one kind of grind with another. He began professional acting around 67 and then worked constantly, moving from film to TV with a rhythm that didn't allow him to slow down. He appeared on The Andy Griffith Show and Leave It to Beaver, and later kept showing up across the era's biggest series because he was reliable, quick, and never complained. But that reliability came from a lifetime of being trained to endure, and the older he got, the more that pace demanded from his body. His marriage carried its own quiet sorrow. Mustin married Frances Robina Woods in 1915, and they stayed together for 54 years, a rare kind of long loyalty, but also a long partnership built through changing eras and constant work. They had no children, and when Francis died in 1969, the loss didn't just leave him alone, it removed the one person who had known him before the late-blooming fame. After that, work and routine became a way to keep moving so the silence wouldn't get too loud, and roles in projects like All in the Family and later Phyllis filled the space where grief sat. Mustin died on January 28, 1977, in Glendale, California, at 92 years old, from natural causes, with services held at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Hollywood Hills. His estimated $400,000 net worth, earned mainly from his late acting career and steady character work, fit the truth of his story. Not fortune, but persistence, built slowly and paid for with time. ADAM-12 once stood for order, duty, and calm voices in chaos. But behind the badges, the real lives of its cast were marked by loss, illness, and quiet endings far from the spotlight. How many of these tragedies did you truly know, and which one shocked you the most? Leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood histories.